Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
And welcome to the show, everybody, and that includes people in America and around the world. This is Rich Scheben from Montana sitting in for Vincent Finelli. He's catching up on a lot of farming chores, and he's a little inundated with lots of rain, so things are a little slow in his neck of the woods. So in my neck of the woods, I'm going to take advantage of a little airtime. And what I'm going to do is what I usually do. I'm going to try to defend America. I'm going to stick up for the little guy, the bottom 93% of income earners. I'm going to try to wake people up. I'm going to use financial, economic, social, and political rationale and connect the dots to corruption, manipulation, double standards. And I'm going to digress. I'm going to go into tangents. I'm going to talk about the chain reactions of all this, on how there's a psyop behind the scenes and the agenda and the consequences that's happening in America. And yes, I will use personal experience. And personal experience really has credibility, folks, because I said this on Friday. I'm going to say it again. I'm going to say a few things I said on Friday again. And how many times, whether it be the mainstream media, the Democrats, even the rhinos on the right, Hollywood, big tech, big pharma, we see them and they get caught every day with secondhand information, third-hand information, fourth-hand information, rumors, gossip, hearsay. What does that remind you of? Everything that's fake, made up, set up, everything that's phony. And we've seen this for over 3 years in the Trump administration. Not that they're doing it, but they are the target. Russia, 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 Ukraine, 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 the P dossier, Stormy Daniels, General Flynn, the Mueller trial, Obamagate, Spygate, on and on and on, with no evidence and no credibility. It's gone over the top, folks. And the only people who's really going to change it is us. You know, it's just like this COVID-19. Is it really about our personal safety? Is it really about us, or is it about the agenda? And I talked about the agenda many times against Trump and the Patriots, and the chain reaction that's occurring. Crashing the economy, delegitimizing work, eliminating free markets, forcing austerity with no representation for the little guy, getting rid of cash because it's so-called dirty. It might carry the virus. So we can have a government-created, centralized cryptocurrency or centralized something, which means you will be in a cash system for the rest of your life. Unless, of course, you can throw a ball through a hoop or do some type of bread and circus, or you're really good at dividing the people or dumbing them down, then maybe you'll get a better life than the rest of us. Is it to stop patriotic, peaceful assembly? Is it to allow technology to be controlled by big tech and China with the assistance of the UN, the World Health Organization, Hollywood, Soros, Gates, and all the other big-name players. Well, what we have is the worst unemployment ever. How about social distancing? Is it to make us submissive, break our will, embarrass the people? Wear those silly hats so you can embarrass everybody who's wearing them to promote submissiveness? How about domestic violence increasing, depression, suicides, division, chaos, infighting? How about the elimination of the Constitution, freedom, liberty, and the rule of law? That's right. Our Constitution is the rule of law. How about food shortages? That's code for starvation, folks. How about depopulation? Elimination of free speech. Forced vaccines to lower our immune system. Just as 5G towers going everywhere. So we can have immunity passports. Forced lockdowns, house arrests. And delegitimizing work, where unemployment's around 23%. Have I mentioned delegitimizing work? Yes, I have. And I mention this a lot because a lot of people like hearing the truth. So this is what happens when we allow the powers that be to use political correctness and allow divide and conquer strategies to occur. The simple term for political correctness, folks, the number one antonym is truth. But that doesn't matter because once in a while the mainstream media really shows their hand, like when Micah Brzezinski from MSNBC says, quote, the media's job is to control exactly what people think. So do you want to be sheeple? Do you want to be told what to do, what to say, who to do it with, when to do it, where to go? And be monitored by some type of electronic gimmick that shows you every move? So you can be blackmailed, bribed, coerced into some type of conformity, blacklisted? We can no longer hedge our bet, folks. We have laws, we have a Bill of Rights, we have a Constitution. The silent majority must now show up. Being an American is not a participation sport. We can no longer stick up for a group, hyphen, or pronoun. True patriots are hated for standing for principle. See, the powers that be, too many people think they care about what group you're in. They care about your gender, the gender you identify, your shade of skin pigmentation, your sexual orientation, your religion. No, they don't. What they do is try to create as much chaos and infighting as possible to create division, which is, again, divide and conquer strategies under political correct category. There's 1,000 subsets under political correctness. And that's what they do. And I've given thousands of examples over the years on how the powers that be, while we're infighting against each other and demanding to lower the bars of standards and expectations for a job, they're taking money and redistributing that wealth from the bottom 93% to the pockets of the super wealthy. And this is why I talk about laws of excess. So let's talk about delegitimizing work, since I went there already. When certain people or groups demand to lower the bars of standards and expectations for a job based on what victim group status you have, eliminating certain criteria that has made America great, like hard work, proven results, qualifications. When you demand to lower the bars of standards and expectations for a job because of what group you come from, you are doubting your own value. You're creating an economic black hole. And we can see this, and I've talked about this forever, how we're in a deflationary, stagflationary environment with inflation for the necessities for the little guy going through the roof. So when we demand to lower the bars of standards and expectations, and you demand to reward mediocrity, the little guy, because of the destruction of America, doesn't get the opportunities and knowledge and ingenuity and productivity and innovation opportunities that the elite have. You never empower a nation or a group by demanding to lower the bars of standards and expectations. What they're really doing in front of your face, not just behind your back, is insulting your work ethic, your ability, and your intelligence. So you turn America into a law of diminishing returns when nothing matters, and people are giving up because there's no opportunity, there's no availability. There's nothing because nothing matters. And the same people who are demanding to lower the bars of standards and expectations for a job are demanding that the people who are directly affected don't have protection, rights, or restitution under the rule of law. In other words, there's no check on runaway power. And what we do is the same people have been enabling and protecting the most corrupt companies and industries in our country and the world by giving them a liability immunity. So when you try to defend your group, your hyphen, and your pronoun, in lieu of starting to be Americans, you're really insulting yourself. Because the welfare, the food stamps, what the little guys get is nothing compared to what the big corporate America and government workers get in benefits, paychecks, and pensions. We have given free lunch to the elite by allowing this political correctness to happen. And all that wealth redistribution not only goes from the little guy to the big guy, but they're creating precedents and tax loopholes and giving themselves the best asset ownership while we're fighting against each other with divide and conquer strategies. Haven't you noticed, whether it be Hollywood or the mainstream media or the elite, the biggest mouths, the people who have the best opportunity for nepotism connections, who feel the most entitled, who have the biggest inheritances, have the biggest mouths, and yet they're going after certain people and selling them out to the highest bidder, eliminating the rule of law, while they're basically, especially in high government positions, manufacturing the perception of their own self-importance and self-preservation. Hypocrisy and double standards and brainwashing is being done every 5 seconds in this country right now. And they're using the little people as pawns while we don't get any representation. And they're destroying us. They're killing us biologically, chemically, technologically, while we're being psychologically neutered. We're allowing the elite to poison us against ourselves. And this is why we need a proportionate response to the people waking up, who is exponential, but those same people have to speak up and do something about it. That's where we are in America. Because the powers that be are going to be using forced vaccines, eugenics, depopulation, genocide against us. We have to stop their free lunch. Folks, I will be back right after the break. I appreciate you being here. Welcome back to the show, folks. Rich Scheben here, sitting in for Vincent Finelli, who's catching up on some farming. And what's going on in America right now is a major wake-up, and it's been going on for a year. And people are understanding that we are losing our freedoms, our liberties. And what the bottom line is that the patriots, the authors, the alternative media are doing the work that the mainstream media, the elite, academia, lawyers, judges, politicians, bankers, FBI, CIA, all intelligence agencies, including the DOJ, won't. And they're spending our money on their cover-ups. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to do what our regular listeners are used to me doing. Vince always calls it news in a flash, and because I'm by myself, I'll try and speak a little slower. I feel obligated to give as much information to the people as possible, to wake up as many people as possible, because I really feel that our next 6 months is going to make or break our country. This is it. This next 6 months is D-Day, and if we do not go back to the rule of law, if we do not go back to truth, and you've heard me many times mention the baseline for standing for principle, just the base, and that is the same rules, laws, and accountability for everybody. The second is truth, and the third is if someone has less consequences for their behavior because of what group they come from, then you better do it. Because we can't have a sliding scale of rules, laws, and accountability. You know, I've heard all the subsets under rules like ethics and morals and values. I've heard all the subsets under law like policies. And the word accountability doesn't even mean anything in this country anymore. It all depends what group you come from. Is it private sector? Is it public sector? What part of the hierarchy are you in government versus, say, the private sector, especially the big corporate America private sector, because a little guy has no protection under the rule of law, and that's why we have a fascist system that Donald Trump inherited. He inherited a very corrupt system, and I'm going to talk about that in a little more detail, as I did on Friday. So what I'm going to do is a little news in a flash, and I'm going to talk about some articles. And when I pick articles, I usually choose pretty up-to-date articles that have occurred, published articles in the public domain since I was last on the air. And the last time I was on the air was Friday, but it's not hard to find articles. In fact, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to, instead of starting with the bad news, or it should be categorized as the obstacles that President Trump has to deal with on a daily basis from traitors and cowards. I'm going to start with some good news, not that these things will be coming to fruition, but at least they're going into print. And the first article is, researchers in Ecuador claim 100% COVID-19 cure rate with chlorine dioxide. Now, do you remember, folks, when President Trump mentioned something and the mainstream media took it 100% out of context when he was talking about, injecting something? Well, chlorine dioxide basically is also a mineral solution known as MMS. Not a drug, it's a mineral solution. And it's 22% sodium chloride, which when activated becomes chlorine dioxide. And some of you might know it again as MMS, and it's registered by the FDA for methicillin-resistant Staph aureus prevention protocol. Now, it's a powerful oxidizer, and it destroys poisons, neutralizes chemicals, kills parasites, and releases a certain heat energy. So there's certain things that, because of laws, you can't say the word cures. And that's basically the perfect opportunity for plausible deniability with big pharmaceutical companies. And I will be back, folks, right after the break. I really appreciate you being here. Please stay with us. Welcome back, folks. Rich Scheben sitting in for Vincent Finelli, and I'm going over some slightly good news in articles, which is yet to be seen, but probably all theater. The next article is Democrat governors hit with a flurry of lawsuits. Well, let's see what happens. This regarding to lockdown and things of that nature. Let's see where this goes. I'm not going to hang my hat on anything optimistic right now because our lawyers and judges, which we have proved, are bought and paid for. It's unbelievable when you think of the fact that we have had for decades more lawyers than the whole world combined. Can you imagine the size of this group being bought and paid for? Wow. We're in trouble. Next article, Washington Post mocked without mercy for Stacey Abrams' profile, calling her a supermodel. I want to go there so bad, but I'm not. Next article, Cuomo scrambles to change nursing homes, virus policies amid catastrophic death tolls, and Democrats are calling for independent investigation. That's probably going to be theater to buy time and to saturate the news wires. Next article, 2 months later, Andrew Cuomo says protecting nursing homes top priority. Aha. It's amazing to me. All right. Next article. Italian politician demands Bill Gates arrest for crimes against humanity. You know, when you really think about it, folks, why is, President Trump has admitted he was on HCQ, I can't even pronounce it right now because I don't have it in front of me, HCQ. Okay, and it's amazing how the elite and the Democrats are protecting big pharma profits. And are there other cures about this drug that the elites don't want us to know about? See, the big pharma, which I worked for over 20 years, I'm going to talk about that in a little bit here. They don't care about cures. They want to manage symptoms for profit. And as we can see, all the so-called experts are bought and paid for to follow the prescribed, no pun intended, narrative. And that's where we are at. Next article. Congress calls Bezos to testify over possibly, see that? Criminally false Amazon claims. That's yet to be determined, folks, because with all of our lawyers and judges being bought and paid for, I think everything is just theater right now in this country. Now I'm going to go for some of the articles that you could label it as bad news, but I'm going to really label it as the obstacles that our president has to go through on a minute-by-minute basis. Our president who takes a $1 salary, our president who's a billionaire who could be living this great life on a hill, flying all around the world, going on fishing trips, doing this, doing that, but yet he's taken all this for us, and I think he deserves some respect for it. Now, I realize there's a lot of things he's not doing that we think he should be doing, and that's called, Monday morning quarterback. But he's surrounded by so many traitors and cowards who only care about manufacturing their perception of their own self-importance and self-preservation. So here we go. First article. House Democrats tell SCOTUS, Supreme Court of the United States, they may impeach Trump again. See, they need to saturate the news wires. It's all about offense for them and doubling down. It's not about evidence. It's not about the rule of law. It's desperation is what it is. Next article. Report 6 of 7 high-risk sex offenders freed in California rearrested. This is for your public safety, folks. Next article, report, Los Angeles inmates freed from jail without being tested for COVID-19. See, they got to have chaos. They got to have infighting. This is what it's all about. This is from the city where the mayor says, you don't do what I tell you, I am going to shut off your power and your water. We don't just have medical tyranny here, folks. We have totalitarian, tyrannical. This is beyond 1984 and Orwell, way beyond it. Next article. 68% of unemployed workers in the U.S. are eligible for payments that are greater than the loss of earnings. See, I've been mentioning this for years, and this is why I harp on this. And it's not just because a lot of people are thanking me for mentioning this. It's the fact that delegitimizing work is part of the agenda. That's why I've been mentioning this for years. When you demand to lower the bars of standards and expectations for a job, You make hard work, effort, proven results, and qualifications worth a lot less. And what you're doing is you're doubting the value of people who are buying into this victim group, protectionist group status. And then when you eliminate the rights and the protection and restitution of the rule of law by demanding that, no check on runaway power, you're setting precedents where the rule of law means nothing. And we've given countless examples of that, while enabling and protecting those corrupt companies and industries in the country and the world. Next article. United Nations claims it's politically incorrect to say husband or wife. I know a lot of you think I'm making up these articles. I promise you I am not. These are all published articles in the public domain. I could not make this stuff up. Next article. Meet Barbara Ferrer, the social justice warrior with no medical background, leading LA's COVID response. So much for experts. As long as you play with the agenda and the narrative, you can be anything you want as long as you say the right thing and don't say the wrong thing. Next article. Hillary Clinton lumps armed shutdown protesters alongside domestic terrorism. No, it's in our Bill of Rights. It's in our Constitution. It's the rule of law. When governments go tyrannical, when they don't give rights or restitution to their people, when everybody in every organization at the top is bought and paid for, including the FBI, the DOJ, the NSA, the CIA, what are people supposed to do? How do we survive? Next article. William Barr speaks, no criminal charges for Obama or Biden. Well, if there's no criminal charges, I just really hope that there's military charges. Because we've talked on this show, and almost every show in the alternative media has talked about Fusion GPS, Hillary Clinton, Obama, all these guys, Clapper, Brennan. I mean, the list is so long, and we've connected so many dots, and we really need justice. Because if the rule of law is gone in this instance, then America's gone too, and they're going to take the middle class with it if it's not gone already. Next article: taxpayer-funded PBS partners with communists on pro-Beijing documentary. I swear to God, I'm not making this stuff up, folks. This is real published articles in the public domain and verified. Next articles. Bars and restaurants allowed to reopen if they agree to snitch on customers regarding your credit card, regarding your behaviors, regarding what you say, regarding what you eat, regarding about. This is where we're going. And I talked about the next article here, public humiliation. Cafes are making customers wear stupid hats with these things you float on in the pool and little kids hit each other with to enforce social distancing. I am not kidding you. I've seen the videos. For lease, the commercial real estate apocalypse in photos. We've talked about how commercial real estate is going down fast. Next article. Pelosi gives stimulus checks to illegals. Illegals. Next article. Pelosi coronavirus plan bails out rich with tax breaks and cheap labor. See, folks, all the bailouts, the too big to fails, the too big to jails. You know, when I've talked about welfare for the rich so many times, you know, regarding printing money out of thin air, all these so-called liquidity arguments where it goes to the banks and Wall Street, fractional reserve lending, banks lending out way more than they have with no consequences, stock buybacks. I've spent tons of time on this regarding the fact that the money doesn't go into new products or services, doesn't go into expansion R&D. It goes into earnings per share by getting rid of outstanding shares of stock. So the dividends go to the elite, the top 10% who own the stocks, who can afford the stocks, who are basically getting bailed out, not through supply and demand and free markets, and then the executives get to cash in their stock options while they're creating new debt for acquisitions and mergers and basically consolidating, which means getting rid of even more employees. So that's where we're at. Next article. Speaker of the House fat shames the president. This is Nancy Pelosi. It's not a good idea for morbidly obese Trump to take hydroxychloroquine. Okay, it's spelled out in front of me here. I can remember HCQ here. So this is what we're. Can you imagine when a Republican fat shames anybody? Oh my gosh, he's a racist, bigot, sexist, misogynist, homophobe, xenophobe, ismist, you name it. There's something about this HCQ, folks, that we need to figure out what other possible cures or management of symptoms it has, because this is a 60-year-old drug that's very inexpensive, and Big Pharma and Big Tech want the profits. And they want eugenics, depopulation, and genocide. They want free lunch. Next article. Graham again rejects call for Obama testimony. There better be a military tribunal, or else America's going to get very ugly. Next article. Amendment to keep feds out of citizens' internet history fails. This is code for we are going to look up what you see. We are going to control what you see. We're going to use this as blackmail against you. That's what that means. Next article. UN officials suggest lockdown should continue. Next article. Top CDC official will just get rid of all whites in the United States who refuse vaccines. I saw the video. This is a quote. Top CDC official will just get rid of all whites in the United States who refuse vaccines. Next article. Google punishing sites who report truth on COVID-19. We've heard real experts, a lot of physicians come forth and talk about the benefits and talk about what's happening behind the scenes with COVID-19 and true death rates. There's been a lot of people reporting how a lot of these hospitals are getting extra money by reporting COVID-19 as a death, even though deaths in so many different instances like heart disease and cancer and so many more are going down. What a coincidence, huh, folks? It's just easy math. I'll be back right after the break, folks. I really appreciate you being here. Welcome back to the show, folks. Rich Scheben sitting in for Vince today. He's catching up on some farming. We're closing out hour number one. I'm going to finish up some more news in a flash here. Next article, Bill de Blasio warns New York City beachgoers you will be taken right out of the water. People, you better start standing up for your rights. Next article, Epstein defender Dershowitz says forced vaccination is legal. Do I even need to comment on that tyrannical, totalitarian, communist remark? Next article, President Tweety, creepy, dorky Joe Biden dings Trump with a stupid nickname. Well, our president has to tweet because 93% of the information and news about him is negative, is out of context, is a hoax, is propaganda, is lies, is gaslighting, and false flags. So how else is he supposed to get to the people? Well, as I mentioned earlier, one of the agendas is to get rid of rallies and get rid of Joe Biden off the air, do a virtual reality so it can be changed and switched up to make him look good. Next article, Treasury Secretary Jacob Lew spied on Flynn, Manafort, and the Trump family, says whistleblower. Breaking exclusive. Next article, Canada partners with China to develop a vaccine for coronavirus, which was spread by China. Can't make this stuff up, folks. Next article, Bill Gates admits that 700,000 people will be harmed or killed by coronavirus vaccines. Pretty good incentive that right there to take that, huh? Andrew Cuomo says nobody should be prosecuted for New York virus deaths. Remember what I talked about when you enable and protect the most corrupt companies or big government in the country, and you give them liability immunity because certain people feel obligated to play the victim group status card and make sure that there's no protection, rights, or restitution under the rule of law for the people, that's when you get no check on runaway power, folks. Next article. Revealed Amazon funding partners with far-left hate group SPLC. Now, I think most 99% of this audience knows that I don't make up these articles because I believe this audience does do its own reading and research, and they've seen some of these articles in the alternative media, which is going to give you a lot better chance of truth in lieu of lies, propaganda, false flags, and hoaxes, which we've given thousands of those over the years. And remember I told you I'm going to go off into tangents, and I am. I really appreciate this Mark Twain quote, and I'm going to repeat it again. I'm going to repeat it as often as I can. It's very short and sweet. In the beginning of a change, the patriot is a scarce man, and brave and hated and scorned. When his cause succeeds, the timid join him, for then it costs nothing to be a patriot. And it's so important, folks, that we listen to our history. We read and research and think for ourselves. You know, Vince and I have said many times, don't believe what we say. Verify it. Do your own reading and research. It's very obvious that the powers that be have duped a lot of people, conned them, played them, used them to poison us against each other. And one of the biggest dupes is when people feel that they need to play the victim group status card and demand to lower the bars and expectations for a job and basically neuter hard work, proven results, qualifications, and etc. So when you do that and you create these economic black holes, you are eliminating the middle class. You are eliminating the control of one's destiny. And when you look at where we're going as a country, you know, especially with the information that we're not getting, that too many people aren't getting because we're being deplatformed or shadow banned, the computer algorithms are censoring and surveilling us. Every time we try to decentralize, which I'm a proponent of at every level, the aristocracy are basically selling people out for this addiction they have of power, money, and control, using hacking, using cookies, computer viruses, while we are allowing the Facebooks, the Googles, and the Amazon to have billions of dollars of contracts with our CIA for cloud services. And this is why we need whistleblowers. We need heroes. Because artificial intelligence is going to take over everything. And we will not have a life. We will be sheeple if we don't stand up and change the corrupt system. Folks, hour number 1 is over. I'll be back in a few minutes. Thank you again for being here. Welcome back, folks. Hour number 2. This is Rich Scheben sitting in for Vincent Finelli. And as you know on this show, we stick up for Main Street and not Wall Street and the big agendas and the liability immunity of the powers that be. So America has gone from freedom and liberty to fascism and authoritarianism. And so what I want to talk about here is what I talked about on Friday a little bit, and I hope President Trump or his people listens to this. I'm going to be very politically incorrect, as I always try and be. And again, that is just code for telling the truth. Now, as most of you know, I don't refer to the book often because I feel that the book, I've gotten so many copies of the book back where the table of contents was gone, the introductory chapter was gone, the first chapter, second chapter gone, words been turned around, words and sentences have been eliminated. We've been in a book burning arena for probably about a decade, and it's not getting any better. So the Nazi left, who wants to control the media, control the police, eliminate citizen journalism, eliminate due process, who are anti-home schools, anti-parents controlling the curriculum. Our courts, judges, and lawyers selling out the American people in the name of justice. voter fraud, election fraud, where the left wants to do mail-in voting. And I've quoted Joseph Stalin many times, where the voter means nothing, and I'm paraphrasing him right now, but who counts the votes means everything. So as we, the patriots, the little guy, fights authoritarianism, communism, socialism, tyranny, dictatorships, fascism, what do? I know people are waking up, but the silent majority must not only wake up, we must speak up, and we have to do something about it, because all this phony benevolence to the phony economy, to the phony philanthropy, basically all they are doing is passing laws, so they say they're paying more taxes, but they're not, because they have every loophole in the world. And they're taking away the good jobs through artificial intelligence, automation, and robotics. And then they leave the opportunities for basically people who are based on certain groups to give this phony benevolence, when all they're doing is taking money from the bottom 93% and redistributing it to the super wealthy who already have money. And they've even admitted to population control. They've admitted to, even bills and legislation with the number 666 attached to it. So I think everything is now out in the open, and they're trying to recruit as many on their side as possible. But we have to stand up for the rule of law. We have to stand up for the little people. We have to stand up for hard work, effort, proven results, and qualifications. And we can no longer protect and enable the most corrupt companies in our country or world. So what I'm going to say to President Donald Trump is I'm going to tell my personal story again. And I want to warn President Trump that I'm pretty sure he realizes that the rule of law has been eliminated and there's no credibility left. Because the little guy doesn't get that protection, just the big guy. When I worked for GSK or GlaxoSmithKline, I'm going to go through that story again. I was instructed not to do that, but I don't really care, because when you tell me not to do something, I'm going to do it 5 times harder. President Trump, you're working, I read an article, and I don't know if a lot of this information has been purged, so if I'm incorrect here, I apologize. But I read an article about you working with an ex-executive of GlaxoSmithKline, GSK, involved in a vaccine plan. You have to realize this company, they don't apologize for anything. They just they'll look at someone like me as a disgruntled employee, even though I wanted a demotion. A demotion. I want you to think about, when I mentioned these articles, which I have over the air before, if you were a small business and did these behaviors, not only would your business, would it survive, or would you be in prison? So I'm going to start with these articles again, because it really shows how much protectionist status Big Pharma has. We've talked about this in many details. Here's an article, U.S. media blackout. Italian court rules vaccine cause autism. This is a GlaxoSmithKline product. Mr. President, do you really want to work with an ex-executive, and do you really believe he's not associated on the table with GlaxoSmithKline anymore, when Italian court rules vaccine cause autism regarding a GlaxoSmithKline product? In fact, there was another article saying that GSK was paying out $63 million to vaccine victims. Do you really want to go there, Mr. President? Next article. Pharmaceutical giant GlaxoSmithKline accidentally released 45 liters of concentrated live polio virus in the environment. And this is in Belgium. Don't you love self-righteousness? Next article. Drug giant pleads guilty, fined for $3 billion for drug marketing. And big pharma criminality no longer a conspiracy theory. Bribery, fraud, price fixing now a matter of public record. And yes, these articles are published in the public domain. So when GlaxoSmithKline are basically fined for bribing doctors, lying to the FDA, hiding clinical trial data and fraudulent marketing, fabricating drug safety data and lying to the FDA, defrauding Medicare and Medicaid out of billions, deceived regulators about the effectiveness of their drugs, relied on deceptive practices to earn billions of dollars while selling potentially dangerous drugs to unsuspecting consumers and medical patients. I believe it doesn't get published often, but the third leading cause of death is basically medical malpractice. So now I realize that it's not just GSK that's defrauded Medicare out of billions, just like Bill Clinton, who basically took gazillions of dollars out of Social Security to replace them with IOUs. But for you people who expect to get Social Security, when your Social Security payment is worthless, it's been dissolved, where they've inflated the U.S. dollar to oblivion, and your purchasing power is nothing. Are you planning on going to GlaxoSmithKline management and stockholders and demanding your money? I'm just curious how this is going to work. See, my personal experience with GlaxoSmithKline has nothing to do with being a disgruntled employee. It has everything to do with the rule of law, everything to do with the same rules, laws, and accountability, everything to do with not allowing certain people to demand no rights and restitution or rule of law. And it's especially about not enabling or protecting the most corrupt companies in the country and in the world with liability immunity. So when I was working, I'm going to try to do a long story short. The story's in the book, but I'm sure it's totally out of context. I was having problems with my legs and my right side. I was getting numbness and pain shooting down my arm and into my legs. I even had managers, believe it or not, who were older than me, drive for me on occasion because I was in so much pain. Now, they didn't know I was driving on painkillers on occasion, because my lawyers told me that they would have basically sacked me right then and there because of liability paranoia. So I was driving with these painkillers, and I even had letters from doctors, orthopedic surgeons, neurosurgeons, demanding that I have reduced to half driving time. So basically, I tried to do a part-time job share. And basically, they made it very clear they didn't care if anybody lived or died. So I tried to do a part-time job share, and Human Resources told me that part-time job shares were for females only. I contacted about 30 attorneys during that certain time period, and I had lawyers tell me that as a poor/middle-class white male heterosexual with a Christian name, I didn't have enough group self-pity points. One lawyer told me that if I was a female and the same exact thing happened to me, where Human Resources told me I could not get that job because you're a female, I would have been on the 5 o'clock news that night with a $10 million lawsuit. And you can ask Vince Finelli, because I sent this to him years ago. I had awards and numbers and great, great records on production, proven results, qualifications that meant nothing. And you could also verify that with Vincent Finelli. You can verify him, what I told him, a few years ago, about a year and a half after I self-published the book. I had someone visit me in a parking lot in the Flathead who followed me and gave me a little short talking to, basically a threat. And he said he worked for GlaxoSmithKline under the table. Who am I going to call? The FDA? The FBI? The CIA? The DOJ? Well, they're all bought and paid for. Who do you call? So, what could I do? They have time to edit, pay off witnesses, possibly do something else to the witnesses. And I'm not saying that all synthetic drugs are bad, folks. I'm just saying maybe you should visit a naturopath first before you go to a regular diagnostician if you're planning on getting prescription drugs. There are some good ones, but a lot of them are unnecessary. Folks, we will be back right after this break. I really appreciate you being here. It's amazing how fast time goes. And it's amazing to me how fast time goes on this show. I have all these notes, all these talking points, and I'm lucky if I get through 50%. And I realize I'm going a little slower today than I normally do, but I want to make people realize how serious we're in, because America's been yielding to the quitter. Basically, the person who has the most victim group, protectionist group status, or to the most offended. So you cry wolf, you eliminate hard work, effort-proven results, and qualifications, and we wonder why we can't compete in this world of excuses. And the consequences are we're all watching a parade that's titled The Emperor Has No Clothes. And this is why the rich get richer. This is why America's top 10% of wealth average more than 9 times as much income as the bottom 90%. And the wealthiest 1% hold over 50% of its wealth, not just in America, but in the world. So we either speak up or we die. That's basically what it boils down to. A true patriot really has the guts to be hated, and we have to work together or we will die alone. Everybody has to play a role, because when you really realize the sociopath, the psychopath, they need to be loved for their fake benevolence, nobility, self-righteousness, and philanthropy. Again, the biggest mouths are the biggest gazillionaires. And this is why we need laws of excess, because earning and work has been delegitimized. Now, one last thing about that story about me and GlaxoSmithKline. I just found out a few days ago, and just a coincidence, that the lawyer I had, and I'm going to tell you right now, this is my disclaimer, this is speculation. I really enjoyed the lawyer I had, because I went to 30 different attorneys. No one would take my case against GSK. They were either threatened or coerced or blackmailed or blacklisted or intimidated somehow. Well, my lawyer took this case, and then he dropped it. He dropped my case. I just found out a few days ago that my lawyer who dropped my case is now running for the Montana Supreme Court. I better know what everybody's thinking. Again, my disclaimer is this is speculation. I like this guy. He was a nice guy. I'm not going to mention his name because I don't want to ruin his chances, because it is speculation. But what everybody's thinking right now, did GlaxoSmithKline pay him off with money or influence to receive a high position in the future? Don't know. That's why I call it speculation. But this is what's happening, folks. You know, we hear a lot of people using terms like, it's for the greater good. It's the right thing to do. Some people mean well, but are they setting up plausible deniability or self-righteousness? Are they transferring guilt, judging others? Where has that gotten us? It's the right thing to do. It's for the greater good. This is why we need practice what you preach laws. Because we are a country of double standards and hypocrisy based on what group you're in. And it boils down to two groups: victim group status and protectionist group status. And the protectionist group status is the elite, especially the children of the elite. Because there's more legislation for trusts and transferring wealth in inheritances than there is for opportunity, even when we don't have the law protecting us. Even when the law is deliberately going after us. We need the same rules, laws, and accountability, folks. We need to stand for principle. And I will be back right after the bottom of the hour break. I really appreciate you being here. Be back on the other side. Welcome back, folks. Rich Scheben sitting in for Vincent Finelli. And sometimes I probably say things that shock a lot of people. But if we don't say it, if we don't say the truth, where do we expect ourselves to be in the rule and law of hypocrisy and double standards and brainwashing? Now, I'll tell you right now, if anything, if I get suicided, I think we all know who's going to do it. And, this is what happens when you're in the alternative media. A lot of people get threats. That's just the way it is. When you stick up for your country, when you stick up for the little guy, when you stick up for the same rules, laws, accountability, and truth, that's what you get. Now, we all have to move forward, but in a land where work has even been delegitimized, it's hard to do when there's very little trust out there. It's impossible when we see the elite feather their own nest with power, money, and control, and literally take money out of our pockets and say, no, they're not doing it. That's called gaslighting. What we really need right now, folks, are patriots, not some Ivy League, skull and bones secret society. The problem has been that the leader is trying to be bigger than the ideas. The leader can't be bigger than the ideas. Now, President Trump, he's bombarded again from traitors and cowards. We wouldn't even be in this position if it wasn't for him. But he wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the patriots and the alternative media. And we have to make sure that the ideas are bigger than the leader or leaders. We have to make sure the powers that be listen to the people. And all I see is when ideas get released, the powers that be, if they can't take credit for them personally, they do not publicize the ideas. In fact, they purge them. And this leads to more fascism. And this is why we need to get rid of fascism, because fascism, when you really think about it, it limits the number of authority figures. So there's less people to bribe, blackmail, blacklist, threaten, etc. I try to, if you saw the fire hazard of notes that I had in front of me, you wouldn't believe it. I just don't even know where to go next sometimes. But since one of my specialties is talking about truth and getting rid of political correctness, I am really going to go out there right now, okay? And this is regarding a topic that I hear so often on almost every venue, and that is God, and that is especially Christianity. Because I grew up, I was confirmed, I was baptized, I went through, all that communion and all that stuff. And on the air, when I don't have a lot of time, I don't get in depth because I don't have time. I'm usually sharing the airwaves with somebody else, or I'm being interviewed, or I'm interviewing somebody else as a guest host. And I usually go in the direction that the guest wants out of common consideration. So, regarding Christianity and God, the reason I got to tell people, and Mr. President, if you're listening, I know you're a believer, but this is why I just say I don't know. And I think there's millions of people in my camp, and this isn't a disclaimer or an excuse. It's just I don't know. If I start saying, promoting God into something, I think I'm going to look like a bit of a hypocrite, and I'm also going to look like I'm hedging my bet. So if there is a heaven, I get to go to it. But if there's a God, I think he's going to see through it. I just say I don't know because, and let me just talk about some of the facts, statistics, and math that leads me in this direction. Okay, when I see the marriage rate, it's at 6.5 people per 1,000 people. I see the divorce rate at 70 to 75%. And that's Christians too. I've seen Christian wives on television for about a 20-year period bragging about how this is their starter marriage. And then the poor husband is in the background saying, no, I gave my word till death do us part, in sickness and in health. Then he loses the house. He loses the kids. He loses everything, but gets the bills for everything. I see a lot of people, and I know I'm really stepping into it here, but I feel in my heart and in my mind, we need guts and courage and these discussions more than anything, because the hypocrisies and double standards are breaking our back. I see a lot of people in the realm of religious self-righteousness producing less forgiveness and making more people feel guilty and judging them. I see churches so many have gone to 501c3 churches. And the pastors and the congregations are getting smaller. I see the rule of law gone, restitution gone, rights for the little people gone. I see versions of the Bible becoming more politically correct. God forbid we want to offend somebody, even if it's the truth. I see more welfare for the wealthy. I see cardinals, priests, bishops, and what they're doing to little boys and girls. The shows on AM and FM, I can't say these things, but you know what I'm talking about. I see the Pope at the same time, when this happens, says the church is no place for homosexuals. And if you're a regular listener, you know I always stick up for adult mutual consensual sex. But when you're doing little boys and sometimes even little girls, that's not adult mutual consensual sex. These are not big words. I see young and old being abused. I see pedophilia running rampant. And let me tell you something, folks. I am far from an angel. But pedophilia, these little kids are never going to have a normal life, ever. When you've had that type of trauma as a little kid, you got no chance of looking at life logically, intelligently. I see no arrest for thousands of people who have frequented Jeffrey Epstein's places and islands. I see the selling of baby parts and literally videos of chopping them up while they're alive, and the people who take the videos get fined or go to jail. I remember one story about priests in Italy. They had all these, there's like 40 of them. They had like male escorts. And I have again, adult mutual consensual sex, I have no problem with it. But when you're talking against certain behaviors, you shouldn't be doing it. This is just common sense and logic. You know, in the book, I think it was chapter 15. I don't even know because so much of what I have written has been changed by the powers that be. in the book-burning era we're in, we've asked for self-sufficiency preparedness schools to help. We would have saved millions of people. I mean, here in Montana, when I dreamed growing up in New York City, I dreamed about coming here and being a mountain man, about living off the land, about hunting and fishing, growing a garden, harvesting edible and medicinal plants. That's kind of what I do. But when I see, now granted this is a per capita number, so you can argue this, but when I see people in Montana being ranked number one for suicide, number one for meth, when I feel we're living in the best place in the world because we're not teaching our children right, they've been taught how to push buttons and be politically correct, and they have no skill sets coming out of school, and they've been socially and politically indoctrinated. And then I see, instead of the elite who could really be a benefit to the people with these self-sufficiency preparedness schools, teaching them off-grid living, teaching them how to raise animals, butcher them, grow a garden, communicate, a little math, a little economy, even balancing the checkbook. Kids don't learn that in school. But I see the elite building bunkers and buying big ranches and islands with their money. And here they are pretending this benevolence and philanthropy. It's all phony. So, for those of you who are Christian, and I know lots of them, and I do know some of them who practice what they preach, I really do. They're not imperfect. Everyone will say that we're all imperfect sinners. Man, I'm at the top of the list. But when you see hypocrisy and you see double standards and you see certain people not saying anything because they don't want to offend somebody, or they don't want to stand up for what they believe in, what's the sense in saying you're a Christian? I just don't know. That's why I say on the air all the time, I just don't know. Now, this is probably in my 9 years of being on the air, probably the longest I've talked about this. But my answer will always be, I just don't know. Because I don't. And boy, am I an imperfect sinner. But we have to move forward, and we have to rebuild trust, but we have to rebuild a country, an economy. We have the rule of law. It's called the Bill of Rights and Constitution. We have a president who's working for $1 a year. A president who we've proved on almost every show in the alternative media that there were planned coups against him. I sure hope that we have military charges against these people. Because when I hear Graham and a lot of people saying we're not going to go after the people at the top, it's very disturbing. You know, our country is in a very precarious spot. When you look at future prosperity, the so-called wealth, currency, money, we can talk about that. We have for hours. Power, perceived power. When the rule of law is gone, we have no rule of law. We have rule of what group you're in. And technology, I see surveillance and censorship setting all these precedents. I see 5G, so many other technologies with electromagnetic radiation, reducing our immune system. What do we do? We have to speak about it. We have to read and research. I'll be right back, folks, after the break. Welcome back, folks. Rich Scheben here for the last segment of the show. I appreciate you being here. I want you to remember that I am an average Joe, non-hyphenated American. So I want you to think what you could do. Because 50% of you are probably better and smarter than me. We have to stand up. The silent majority must be ended. And I was talking before the break, and I'll probably end up with this because this is a very short segment, about future prosperity and measuring a country's direction. I talked about how rule of law, gone. Technology, basically benefiting the elite to be used against the little people. Education, I see social and political indoctrination, where 90% of the degrees are worthless. I've, over the years, quoted many lines from Marx and Alinsky, Cloward and Piven, the Frankfurt School, and their strategy, and hopefully woken up a lot of people because they are using this as one of their main playbooks. I see competitiveness in America. When you lower the bars of standards based on what group you're in, you eliminate opportunity to destroy your middle class, and you create socialism, protection, and liability immunity for the biggest companies, the most corrupt companies in the world. I see economic output and productivity not heading in the right direction, like with stock buybacks and crony capitalism, and our debt, robotics, and artificial intelligence taking over everything. I see military strength lowering the bars of standards and basically promoting what groups you're in for promotions. I see the biggest debate in the military being transgenderism instead of raising the bars of standards and expectations. I see our reserve currency, the Federal Reserve note. And yeah, you got to ask yourself. I realize we're the cleanest shirt in the laundry. We've talked about this in great detail. But how long is this going to last when we're digitally printing and giving the majority of that money to the wealthy and groups that don't deserve it and haven't earned it? And we've talked about this regarding the missing 96% of the wealth that's been created out of thin air. And I don't have time to go through that again. I look at government confidence. There's a lot of confidence in President Trump, but he inherited corruption to the core. The FBI, the CIA, the DOJ, central banks, lawyers, judges, where there's no rights or restitution under the rule of law, only protecting big government and big corrupt corporations while trying to set precedents along the way with a different set of rules, laws, and accountability based on victim group or protectionist group status. I see non-functional, unsustainable gig economies going down. I see manufacturing perception of self-importance and preservation. How can there be confidence when every corner you go around is hypocrisy and double standards based on who you are? Corruption, manipulation, fraud, racketeering, crimes, pedophilia, treason, sedition, espionage. I see less transparency and less light at the end of the tunnel for the people. I see the avoidance of declassifications, which enforces a caste system. I see the powers that be, and I don't mean President Trump, I mean mostly the people on the left and rhinos that don't even want rallies or peaceful assemblies. I see the mainstream media being totally bought and paid for, and they want to make rallies and debates and voting a virtual reality stunt. We see banks with no origination risk getting free treasury money and lending it out to businesses for profit. Again, delegitimizing work. The Federal Reserve buying everything. We're turning into Japan. And the Fed can lend directly to the people and buy the assets from the middle class. But no, we have to have capitalism. And the people at the top, they don't just get socialism. They get too big to fail, too big to jail, and anything they want to do, they get to do. But at the same time, they want to give us medical passports with chips implanted under our skin or tattoos. More entertainment, more breads and circuses, and dumbing down and dividing the people. Every teacher should be, in my opinion, 60 years old. They should be doing part-time job shares. They should be teaching practical experience and not theory. They need to have 15 years of successful private sector experience. People, we either stand up for the rule of law now, or everything that our combat soldiers, over 1 million of them, died for, in mud and dirt, blood, will be for naught. It's up to us. It's up to you. I want to thank you for being here. You all have a great day. I will see you next time.